Hello and welcome to Business Today Television. I'm Siddharth Zarabi, and joining me now to decode the impact of Donald Trump's return to the White House as the President of the United States of America is one of the most influential and well-known voices on the India-US partnership, Dr. Mukesh Aghi, President and CEO of the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, the USISPF. Good morning, Dr. Aghi. Welcome to Business Today. It must have been a long night for you tracking the results, and those of us who are watching this broadcast here in India, the first question that everybody will want to ask is, what does the return of Donald Trump mean for the India-US partnership?
Well, good morning, Siddharth, and thank you for having me on your show. I think the impact is global of Donald Trump coming back as a president, and it also impacts India substantially. Let's look at both from a geopolitical perspective and economic. Geopolitically, basically, Donald Trump is an aggressive hawk on China. His experience with China has been that when he was trying to build a partnership with China, China committed buying $200 billion worth of goods from the US, and they bought nothing. So he has that, what I call is a trust deficit with China. With India, you have to understand, he has a very good relationship with Prime Minister Modi. He calls him my friend, Prime Minister Modi. And so that really helps. But overall, he calls India a tariff king. So the impact is going to be multiple front for India. One is 20% tariff he's going to put on different countries. India comes in the same category. So India has to figure out how to manage that positioning which Trump is going to put in, whereas he promised to put 60% tariffs on China itself. The second aspect you have to understand is the FDI coming from US into India, especially in manufacturing sector. That may also have an impact because if they're manufacturing goods in India to be exported to the US and they are coming at a 20% tariff, then that makes it more expensive. So I think a lot of companies will start relooking at how do you basically get the global supply chain more efficient while leveraging India's skilled resources and also India's market. But more important is technology transfer. I think India under Biden administration was able to basically execute a very strong ICT and ISET itself. And some of the critical technologies may either slow down or Trump may question that. So I think from an economic perspective, India will have some turbulence early on, but as time goes by, it will settle down because geopolitically, US will need India to counter China also.
Dr. Aghi, given the fact that India, the US is India's largest trading partner, and if we take a look at 10 years of Prime Minister Modi and from 2014 onwards, roughly total trade between the two countries has doubled to $120 billion. Obviously, we export more than what we import from America, and the point that you made about American companies, almost 1,000 plus companies in India and a very substantial set of IT and IT enabled services exports. The markets in India seem to be reflecting the Trump trade in a way, and trade has closed now in India, but we were up in our markets today. Do you feel that there are certain sectors that are perhaps going to benefit more than some of those that may lose initially on account of the change in US policies?
Well, when you look at the trade between the two countries, yes, the export of IT services is the biggest export coming in. At the same time, what we're seeing is India's exports, especially in the jewelry, especially in the chemicals and others, that will continue to go up because what really are seeing is that objective of Trump administration is to bring in more manufacturing back into the US. The challenge is that while US would like to bring that back, we don't have the skilled resources, the capacity to basically leverage that. So I think what I see is a pressure point where I think an opportunity comes in for India to build some kind of a free trade agreement with the United States, which was not being considered by the Biden administration. FTA between the two countries will basically ensure that the global supply chain move efficiently from India into United States. India's exports don't get penalized from that perspective. At the same time, you have to understand the US companies are looking at India also from a GCC perspective, global capability centers. And we have over 1,600 of those at the moment, and they contribute almost $125 billion exports from India to the rest of the world. So I strongly believe that while the stress factor between US and China will go up, that's going to put a lot of pressure on US companies to de-risk their supply chain from China, not only just from a stress factor, but also from a duty perspective. And India becomes pivotal, not only leveraging India from a skilled resources, but also growing India's market, which is $4 trillion GDP. It's going to go to $5 trillion. And so US companies would like to basically leverage that growing market. And the classic example is Apple, which has moved its manufacturing, substantial manufacturing, into India. 25% of the iPhone 16s will be exported from India to the rest of the world itself. And Apple has been able to get almost $5 billion domestic revenue going in. So other companies see that opportunity. So I think you will see a trend where FTA will drive much more efficiency between the two trading partners.
Dr. Aghi, the India-US FTA has been spoken about for almost 2 decades now. This time around, what do you think India needs to do in terms of adapting to the change in the US administration to ensure that the FTA comes through? In the past, issues like market access have been a sticky point. The movement of human resources has been a sticky point. What does India need to do to ensure that the negative fallout, if any, is minimized?
Well, earlier there was no political will to take the risk on the agriculture side, to take the risk on mobility aspect and open the market because of domestic lobbying also. But I think what we are seeing is as India does is trade partnership with UAE, with Australia, in discussion with UK, in discussion with EU, there is a confidence which has gone up both in the domestic market and also in the political leadership to leverage the trade agreements. And while during the previous Trump administration, India was hoping for a mini trade deal, and it had basically given up. When I say given opening to US in the agriculture sector and other aspect, somehow it didn't happen. Under Biden administration, India tried very hard in every aspect to drive that, but Biden administration was reluctant to do any trade deal with anybody. So I think there is a tremendous opportunity now for India to put forward a trade agreement, which I think Trump administration will leverage it. And I would probably suggest one more thought process. Geopolitically, we have a quiet partnership with the United States, Japan, and Australia. When you look at the 4 countries, their total combined GDP is roughly around $35 trillion. US has a trade agreement with Japan. US has a trade agreement with Australia. India has some kind of a trade agreement with Japan and Australia. So if you can combine those into a single market, that may be a easy way to move forward, because now you're security-wise aligned, technologically aligned, and economically be aligned also.
Well, the moment you sketched that out, my mind went to this term that can we ever envision and talk about a quad FTA, because that's a very intriguing possibility, or a regional pact between the quad nations, particularly purely from a trade point of view and not just what the quad intends to do. In terms of strategic cooperation between the first Trump administration, what happened during the Biden administration, what do you sense is likely to happen now onwards?
So I think when you look at strategically, what you have is a war in Ukraine and Russia, and Trump administration has said that they will not fund any more Ukraine from that perspective, and there's a relationship between Putin and Trump. So we see some kind of a solution taking forward in that arena. When you look at the Middle East, I think you will see Trump administration giving more leeway to Israel to basically move forward in its dealing with Hezbollah, Houthis, and Hamas itself. But more important is there is a trust deficit with China. In the first administration, China had promised substantial amount of procurement from United States, over $200 billion, and nothing happened. And so US will look at China in a much more aggressive manner, both from an economic perspective and also from a geopolitical perspective. And I think that's where India plays a pivotal role, because I think that's where US and India are aligned geopolitically. So I think that you'll see a much more stronger collaboration and cooperation between the two countries. You have to understand one thing which has come out very clearly in the Ukraine war is that nations which have a strong industrial base can sustain a long-term war. And what we have seen is the US industrial base has moved to China. And so while US will push every manner to move that back to the US, I think certain aspect of manufacturing will not move back. And that's why India plays a pivotal role. And so when you look at some of the agreements signed with Biden administration, talking about setting up a chip plant in India, talking about setting up some of the defense manufacturing in India, India plays a pivotal role being part of that industrial base. So I think you'll see stronger collaboration and cooperation between India and the United States as US takes a much more aggressive posture with China.
What about defense purchases? In the first Trump government, there was considerable conversations around that and the Indian expectation of technology transfer. Is something going to move this time around in your view, Dr. Aghi?
Yeah, I think you have to understand in the first term, while Obama and his administration were objecting to, like, for example, the General Atomic Predator drones transfer to India, Trump administration not only okayed that, he said, hey, just take the armed one also. So I think from that perspective, Trump has been quite open about technology transfer to India. I think the question you have to ask is will this impact the ISET in any manner on the quantum side, on the G engine manufacturing side? I think that time will tell. But I think in our understanding, Trump administration, when you look at the past administration, they've been quite open to moving some of the technology transfer to India without any hesitation.
Okay. What about immigration? One of the biggest hot button issues in the elections in the United States, but for India and for the wide diaspora and many of those who may still aspire to move to the United States, what will happen on H-1B? The first Trump term delivered some knocks on that front. What is likely now?
So I think immigration has been a big election issue. You have 16 million illegal aliens in the United States. So you will see a much more aggressive posture. In fact, the third largest cross-border from southern border are the Indians who are coming in. And so that is becoming an issue with the administration, and it'll become a big issue with the incoming Trump administration itself. Because this is a pro-business administration, the Trump administration, what we will see is a reform on the legal immigration. They will need skilled resources as the economy grows. And so you will see a dramatic shift happening on the H-1B. And we believe that you will see that a lot of skilled STEM graduates, especially in the master's and PhD program, will get a quicker residency permit. You will see also reform on the green H-1B workers moving to green card category, which is categorized by quota system between countries, and India has to wait over a decade to give those green card. That will also change. So you will see aggressive reform taking place on legal immigration to bring in more skilled resources into the country.
What do you think Indian IT companies need to do in terms of perhaps shifting their stance? Over the past several years, Dr. Aghi, we have seen that Indian IT companies have increased their hiring locally in the United States. Will that need to increase? Are there any other changes that Indian IT companies need to consider?
Well, I think what we have seen is the trend is to hire local, and that trend continues. Yes, you will need workers, which have to be on site to deal with the critical issues itself. But with the advent of AI, with the advent of other technologies, a lot of this work can be done remotely. And what we are seeing is a trend where it's not just about Indian IT companies coming to the US. What we are seeing is the value chain going up, and where US companies are setting up global capability centers in India to leverage these skilled resources. When I talk about global capability centers, these are not just building up a small, low-end product itself. Almost every chip in the world now is designed in India. You look at large technology company, substantial amount of the IP is now coming out of the global capability centers from India itself. So the migration of resources and skills and job opportunities is now moving from US into India. So I think yes, the more you can hire locally, that's going to help. But the trend seems to be moving a lot of resources or opportunity from US into India itself.
Dr. Aghi, I want to go back to an earlier point in our conversation, which is the 60% tariff comment that was made in the past with regard to China. We don't know whether that will happen. If indeed such a scenario were to play out, do you think there is a strong possibility that some manufacturing facilities will move to India? And I'm trying to build a scenario here for our viewers, 20% on imports from India, but 60% from China, a differential of 40%. Do you think companies might play around with that arbitrage, and that could in turn see greater manufacturing facilities being set up within India?
Well, there are two factors which play a pivotal role in moving manufacturing into India. One is the geopolitical stress point between US and China. We expect that to go up and deeper. And that means every boardroom today is asking the question, how do you de-risk their supply chain? So you will see a lot of that manufacturing moving out of China. At the same time, companies are looking at where are the opportunities also. India's GDP is growing from 4 to 5 and will go beyond that. So companies are saying, yes, I'll move my manufacturing, but also leverage the domestic consumption of their manufacturing itself. So India becomes much more critical. Yes, you have companies moving into Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, but they have certain capacity constraints itself, whereas India does not have that capacity constraint. And when you look at the median age in India, it is still at 28, 29. So we expect the skill availability, which will be globally competitive and technology competent, to stay on for a long, long time. So we do expect, when you put 60% tariffs on Chinese import, you will see an acceleration of movement of US companies moving to other geographies.
Okay. There's been a lot of chatter around a dream outcome for Elon Musk, who sort of went all in supporting Donald Trump, the US markets, and what's happening with the Tesla stock, also a reflection of that. Since there is considerable interest around both the person, Elon Musk, and his businesses like Starlink and Tesla in India, and there have been conversations in the past. Uh, what could you tell our viewers with regard to how India can approach some of Elon Musk's companies? Do you see that also being a factor, and his influence in the new Trump administration having play out with regard to India's approach?
No, absolutely. I think Elon Musk will have a tremendous influence on the new administration. He has put in over $100 million of his personal money in the Trump campaign. Trump called him a new star itself. And you have to understand that Elon Musk has a big investment in China, especially his mega Tesla plant itself. So he has got a lot of market share, but at the same time, he faces competition from Chinese EV market. And India is one market where Chinese are still not there. So it's a tremendous opportunity for Elon Musk to come into India. Yes, he will leverage the administration to get access to the basically broadband through these Starlinks into Indian market. So yes, when you look at yesterday's Tesla stock went up by 13%. So you will see Elon Musk leveraging Trump administration to drive his own business interests globally. And it will put some kind of a pressure on India to basically work with Elon Musk through the administration itself.
The conversation within India so far, and whatever we have picked up from the government and decision makers with regard to how satellite spectrum may be offered to private players, seems to suggest that there isn't a consensus for a high priced auction. There is, of course, a point of view that a couple of the leading telecom operators in India have on this subject. I just wanted to ask you, from the global experience, what sort of policy with regard to pricing satellite spectrum might work for India in the long run, Dr. Aghi, if you have a view on that?
I think obviously India has to decide what's good for India, either go with allocation or basically or just go for a pricing point itself. What is critical is that competition is good for the consumer. And if you bring in international player, it brings in international competition. It brings in international services also. But then you also to look at from a domestic security perspective, what is good for the country itself. So I would say that I leave it up to the policymaker to take a call. Is the auction the right approach or allocation the right approach?
I want to wrap up this conversation by talking about a broader issue that one has picked up in conversations over the past several months within India. And this really started off around the time India pursued its own energy interests in continuing to buy crude oil from Russia after the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We've also seen some other issues around allegations with regard to a US citizen. I wanted to ask you broadly, are these sufficiently big to sort of derail the overall India-US strategic partnership, or are these irritants that two mature democracies and governments will deal and will continue to deal with pretty effectively?
Well, I think on the issue of buying Russian crude and on the issue of Panam case, when you look at India buying Russian crude, it helps India's economy, it helps India's inflation, and we do not see much stress point in the US because a lot of this crude is refined and is being exported to Europe and United States itself. So the beneficiary of that is not just India, it's Europe and United States. And I think nobody's objecting to that. In fact, what it does is it creates an open field for the European to buy Middle Eastern energy where India was buying earlier. So I think it's a win-win scenario for everybody. Now, in the case of a Panam case, I think, yes, There has been accusation. India has been working with the Justice Department, providing all the data which is needed. India has basically taken the action as required by the U.S. Justice Department. So to me, that's a non-issue as you compare to what has happened in Canada, because I think in Canada's case, it has become a political issue, which is driven by the Prime Minister's office as a propaganda to basically support his tenure. Whereas in the US case, it becomes an irritant, and both countries have dealt with it in a mature fashion. And I think that's the right way to take this forward. So I think both Russian oil and Panum case is an irritant, and I think it'll go away with time.
Okay, one final comment, and viewers, we'll try and bring up the visuals of Donald Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi walking. You were just seeing those visuals. I'll request my producers to bring them back up, because Dr. Aghi, I want to end this conversation by asking you to dwell on, and you've seen world leaders and how personal chemistry between leaders, both in the government and private sector, works and sort of gets things moving that don't move for years together. How significant is this personal chemistry, this friendship that both the leaders have spoken about, not just now, but in the past as well? And what kind of positive impact is that likely to happen?
I think the personal chemistry is tremendous, especially when you are geopolitically aligned, economically aligned, technologically aligned, and when you have a large diaspora, especially in the US, which is politically powerful and economically the most affluent minority group. You have to understand, Prime Minister Modi dealt very efficiently in a warm manner with Obama, then with President Trump, and then President Biden. There's no other leader in the world who was consistent all across with the US political leadership and build a strong relationship. In fact, in September during Anga week, when Prime Minister was here, Trump basically spoke about, from Michigan, his potential meeting with him in New York itself. So I think the chemistry does have a positive impact, and you can come up with all the irritants if you are able to basically build that trust mutually between the two countries. So I strongly believe that the relationship between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump will definitely enhance the relationship between India and the United States. And when you have irritant, you can always pick up a phone and call a friend and say, listen, this is working, this is not working, and you can be much more transparent in your discussion. So I think it is very, very positive, and we believe that the two countries will move in the positive direction.
Absolutely. And Dr. Aghi, a lot of Indians will be looking forward to that meeting whenever that happens, the first meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, and what kind of hug and jappi is exchanged between those two leaders. Dr. Aghi, thank you very much for taking out time so early in the day for you to help us understand the impact on business and economy and trade with the change in the US government. We'll hopefully connect with you again very soon as the Trump administration starts off and gets its act out in the open. Thanks very much for your time. With that, it's a wrap on this special conversation, viewers. We'll slip into a short break. More information and news on the other side of a very short break. See you.
Let me start by making the observation that as a student of history, it's all about continuity and change. Today, we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of this platform. The global energy situation 40 years